Austere, where the real story begins after the camera stopped rolling, the truth and TLC.
Janelle breaks free. The emotional moment that changed everything. There are moments in life that don't explode. They don't slam doors or shatter glass. They arrive quietly, softly, almost politely, and yet they change everything for Janelle. It wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't a dramatic exit with cameras chasing her down a driveway. It was something far more powerful. It was a sentence. I don't need permission anymore. That was it. Simple. Calm. But beneath those words was decades of compromise, calculation, restraint, and survival. For years, Janelle was the steady one, logical, financially focused, practical when emotions ran high. She believed in the structure, believed in the shared dream, believed that sacrifice today would build security tomorrow. She helped fund moves. She budgeted, she worked. She stretched herself thin so that the bigger picture could survive. While others fought for attention, she fought for stability, and stability became her identity. But somewhere along the way, stability turned into silence. When Coyote Pass was first presented, it looked like hope. Open land, fresh air, a reset button after Las Vegas, a promise that the chaos would finally settle into something permanent. 4 homes, shared vision, legacy. Janelle believed in that land, not because it was beautiful, not because it was symbolic, but because she saw the numbers, the investment, the future value. She thought, if we can just get through this stage, this will pay off. But months turned into years. Plans stalled, conversations looped, decisions were postponed, and something started to feel off. It wasn't loud at first. It was subtle, like being in a meeting where you realize decisions are already made before you walk in. Janelle began asking practical questions. What's the timeline? Who holds the deed? How are we dividing the lots? Simple questions. Reasonable questions. But the answers felt vague, circular, sometimes defensive. And that's when the shift began. Because Janelle doesn't react emotionally first. She observes, she calculates, she waits. She watched as priorities changed, as resources were directed differently, as energy flowed in one direction more than others. She noticed who was consulted and who wasn't. And one day, standing on that land, looking at property that was supposed to represent unity, she felt something unexpected. Distance. Not physical distance. Emotional distance. The dream she invested in no longer felt shared. It felt managed. The turning point didn't come in a fight. It came in clarity. Clarity is dangerous when you've been operating on hope. There was a conversation, quiet, firm, almost businesslike. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about autonomy. I need my own space. That sentence landed differently, because space doesn't just mean land. It means control. It means decision-making. It means no longer waiting for consensus that may never come. For years, she had waited for group alignment, waited for meetings, waited for approval, and suddenly, she realized something radical. She didn't have to. The idea of building her own home independently started as a practical solution. If the group couldn't move forward, she would. But beneath that practicality was something much deeper. Freedom. Not rebellion. Not revenge. Just freedom. When she began exploring options outside the shared structure, the reactions were subtle, but telling. Questions surfaced. Concerns were raised. The tone shifted. Why the rush? Why now? Why separately? But the real question underneath was different. What happens when the steady one stops holding everything together? Janelle had been the glue in many ways, the calm presence, the financial anchor, the low-drama stabilizer. If she stepped away from that role, the structure would feel it, and she knew that. But for the first time, she chose herself over the structure. There's something incredibly powerful about a woman who has spent decades compromising, suddenly deciding she won't anymore. Not angrily, not bitterly, just decisively. When she said, "I don't need permission anymore," it wasn't directed at one person. It was directed at the system, a system that required consensus to function, a system that often stalled, a system that, over time, began to feel less like partnership and more like hierarchy. The emotional moment that changed everything wasn't loud. It was her signing papers without asking first. It was her making a decision without scheduling a meeting. It was her envisioning a home that didn't require negotiation. That's when the dynamic shifted, because independence exposes imbalance. When one person stops asking, others have to confront why they expected to be asked in the first place, and that realization rippled through everything. She wasn't just building a house, she was dismantling a pattern. The rising tension wasn't about property lines. It was about control lines. Conversations grew shorter, more direct, less accommodating. She no longer softened her stance to keep peace. She no longer absorbed discomfort to prevent conflict. She stated facts. She set timelines. She moved forward, and something surprising happened. She felt lighter. For years, she had carried the emotional labor of being the reasonable one, the one who didn't make waves, the one who adjusted. But adjustment, over time, becomes erosion, and erosion eventually leaves you unrecognizable to yourself. This was reclamation. Her children saw it first. A different energy, a steadier confidence, a willingness to say no. They noticed she wasn't waiting anymore, and that's when it became bigger than land. It became legacy. Because what do you teach your children when you spend decades waiting for permission? And what do you teach them when you finally stop? The emotional weight of that shift is hard to overstate. It wasn't about anger toward anyone. It was about alignment with herself. She had spent years aligning with the collective. Now she was aligning with her own voice. And that voice was calm, clear, certain. The day she stood on her own property, not as part of a shared dream, but as the sole decision-maker, something settled inside her. No committee, no debate, no delay, just her. And sometimes, that's the most radical thing of all. Steady, not borrowed, not negotiated, not dependent on anyone else's agreement, just hers. And that realization didn't come with fireworks. It came with stillness, a deep, grounding stillness that she hadn't felt in years. For so long, every major decision had been filtered through discussion. Group texts, meetings, emotional temperature checks, who feels what, who agrees, who objects. Who needs more time? Time. There was always more time to decide, more time to plan, more time to pray about it, more time to revisit the conversation later. But time has a cost, and Janelle had started calculating that cost differently. Each delay wasn't neutral. It postponed progress. It stalled momentum. It kept her life in a holding pattern, and she was tired of waiting. The real tension didn't erupt in one explosive scene. It unfolded in a series of small but undeniable moments. A request that used to be phrased as, "Is everyone okay with this?" became, "Here's what I'm doing." A discussion that once sought consensus became a notification. That subtle shift sent shockwaves, because when someone stops asking for approval, it forces everyone else to examine why they expected to give it. There were conversations, careful at first, concern masked as curiosity. "Are you sure this is the right move? Wouldn't it be better to figure this out together? Why rush into something separate?" But Janelle wasn't rushing. She was moving at a normal pace for someone who finally decided to stop standing still. And that difference was uncomfortable. Especially for a system built on collective motion, she could feel it, the tension beneath the politeness, the realization that her independence altered the balance. For years, she had adapted to the group's rhythm, adjusted her timeline, softened her stance, compromised her preferences. Now the rhythm had to adjust to her, and not everyone liked that. But here's the thing about growth. It doesn't ask for comfort from the people who benefit from your stagnation. Janelle wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She wasn't trying to prove a point. She simply recognized something undeniable. The dream had changed, not in one dramatic betrayal, not in one explosive fight, but in 1,000 small moments where her priorities no longer aligned with the direction things were going. She had watched dynamics shift, watched decision-making centralize, watched emotional energy concentrate elsewhere, and instead of fighting, she did something far more powerful. She stepped aside, not out of defeat, out of clarity. Clarity is quiet. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't demand validation. It just knows. There was a night, no cameras, no dramatic music, where she sat alone and thought about the years behind her, the moves, the financial risks, the belief in shared equity, the patience. She wasn't angry. She was honest. Honest about the fact that she had outgrown the waiting. Honest about the fact that partnership only works when everyone moves forward together. Honest about the fact that she wanted more. More stability, more autonomy, more ownership, in every sense of the word. And once she admitted that to herself, there was no going back, because self-awareness is a door you can't close once you walk through it. The rising tension reached its peak not in shouting, but in a boundary. I'm doing this. 4 words. Firm. Final. It wasn't defiance. It was declaration, and in that moment, something shifted permanently. The power dynamic changed, not because she demanded control, but because she stopped relinquishing it. When someone who has always been agreeable becomes decisive, it unsettles the room. The steady one stepping into independence is far more disruptive than the outspoken one ever could be. Because everyone expects noise from the loud voice, no one expects revolution from the calm one. Her children felt the shift. Deeply. They saw a mother who was no longer navigating around obstacles, but walking straight through open doors. They saw her speak with certainty instead of caution. They saw her choose peace over approval. And perhaps most importantly, they saw her choose herself. That's the moment that changes everything. Not the land, not the paperwork, not the property lines. The example. The unspoken lesson. You are allowed to evolve beyond what once felt sacred. Coyote Pass may still sit there, quiet, unfinished, symbolic. But Janelle no longer feels tethered to it, because the real foundation she rebuilt wasn't made of concrete. It was made of self-trust, and self-trust is unshakable. There's something profoundly empowering about realizing you don't need a group vote to live your own life. That realization doesn't just free you from others, it frees you from fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of disappointment, fear of standing alone. Standing alone used to feel risky. Now it feels peaceful. Resolution isn't dramatic. There's no triumphant music swelling in the background, just a woman on her own land, making her own plans, moving at her own pace, and that quiet confidence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. The emotional moment that changed everything wasn't the break. It was the permission she gave herself. Permission to stop waiting. Permission to stop negotiating her worth. Permission to move forward, even if no one else was ready. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do. If this story resonates with you, If you've ever realized you were waiting for approval that was never required, share your thoughts below. Subscribe and stay with us as we continue exploring the real turning points behind the headlines. Because sometimes the most powerful freedom isn't loud, it's simply deciding you no longer need permission. Changes in ways you can't immediately explain. It's subtle at first. You wake up and realize your chest feels lighter. Conversations don't feel like negotiations anymore. Decisions don't feel like battles waiting to happen. There's no mental rehearsal before you speak. No internal debate about how your words will land. You just say them. That's where Janelle found herself, not in chaos, but in clarity. The narrative around her might still swirl. Opinions, speculation, questions about loyalty and legacy. But, internally, the storm had passed, because the hardest battle wasn't with anyone else, it was with herself. For years, she told herself patience was strength. That compromise was wisdom. That holding things together was noble, and it was, until it wasn't. There's a difference between choosing peace and choosing silence, between cooperation and self-erasure, between teamwork and invisibility. Janelle slowly realized she had crossed that line, not dramatically, not intentionally, gradually. One postponed plan at a time, one redirected resource at a time, one "we'll talk about it later" at a time. And when later never arrives, you either accept it or you pivot. She pivoted. What makes her story powerful isn't that she left something behind. It's that she walked toward something new. Independence isn't just about space, it's about identity. For so long, she was defined by the structure. The plural marriage, the shared finances, the collective decisions. Her role was clear. Her function was known. But outside of that structure, who is Janelle? That question could have been terrifying. Instead, it became liberating. She began rediscovering parts of herself that had been dormant. Her ambition, her directness, her confidence in numbers and plans and strategy. She wasn't just someone's wife. She wasn't just part of a family system. She was a woman capable of building her own foundation. And when you realize you can build alone, you stop fearing collapse. The emotional resolution didn't come from reconciliation. It came from realization. Realizing that love doesn't require self-sacrifice to the point of disappearance. Realizing that loyalty doesn't mean stagnation. Realizing that growth sometimes looks like distance. Coyote Pass will always represent a chapter, a vision, a complicated dream, but it no longer defines her future. Because her future is no longer dependent on collective momentum. It's powered by personal conviction. There's something incredibly satisfying about watching someone step into their own authority, not angrily, not bitterly, but calmly. That calm is strength. That quiet is power, and that power doesn't need validation. In the end, the emotional moment that changed everything wasn't about land or money or family politics. It was about a shift inside one woman's heart. A shift from waiting to acting, from asking to deciding, from adjusting to leading. And once that shift happens, it echoes into every corner of your life. Her children see it. Her future reflects it. Her peace confirms it. Some stories end with dramatic goodbyes. This one ends with something better. Self-respect. And that's the kind of ending that doesn't just close a chapter. It starts a whole new book. If you've ever reached a moment where you realized your life needed to move at your pace, not someone else's, this story is yours too. Stay connected. Subscribe. Share your thoughts. Because sometimes the most powerful break isn't from a place, it's from a pattern. And once you break the pattern, everything changes. And when everything changes, It doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. There's no headline that captures the quiet rebuilding of a woman's inner world. No camera zooms in on the moment she chooses peace over permission. No dramatic soundtrack plays when she realizes she's no longer afraid. But make no mistake, that's where the real transformation lives. In the quiet. In the ordinary. Tuesday afternoon, where she signs a document without hesitation. In the simple act of making plans that don't require negotiation. In the steady confidence of knowing she can rely on herself. For Janelle, breaking free wasn't about rejecting the past. It was about integrating it. She doesn't regret the years invested. She doesn't dismiss the shared dreams. Those years shaped her, strengthened her, taught her resilience. But she no longer confuses endurance with fulfillment. That distinction is everything. There's a powerful shift that happens when a woman who has always been low maintenance decides she deserves high standards, when someone who rarely demanded begins to expect, when the dependable one stops carrying what others refuse to lift. That shift doesn't just change her life, it changes how everyone around her responds. Suddenly, conversations feel different. The old assumptions don't land the same way. The subtle pressure to conform doesn't work like it used to. Because once you've tasted autonomy, you don't trade it back for comfort. And that's the true resolution here. Not conflict resolved, not relationships perfectly repaired, but identity reclaimed. Coyote Pass might remain unfinished. Plans might never look the way they once did. But Janelle's foundation is stronger than ever, because it's built on choice, and choice is powerful. Choice says I can. Choice says I will. Choice says I don't need to wait anymore. That's the emotional moment that changed everything. Not a fight, not a fracture, but a decision. A decision to stand in her own authority, to trust her instincts, to move forward without fear of disappointing anyone, because at some point, the only person you can't afford to disappoint is yourself, and Janelle finally chose not to. If this journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt the quiet pull towards something more aligned, more honest, more yours, take this as your reminder. You don't need permission. You don't need consensus. You don't need to wait for the perfect timing that may never come. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply decide, and once you do, everything truly changes. If Janelle's journey moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from Coyote Pass. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think will happen? Next, we read every single one, and your voice matters in uncovering the truth behind the sister wives' story.